If your bell peppers come out small, thin-walled, and barely worth slicing, or worse, the plant sits there all summer and gives you 2, maybe 3 fruits total, I need you to hear something that might change the way you grow them from now on. The problem didn't start in the middle of the season. It didn't start when the flowers dropped or when the fruit stayed tiny. It started before the plant ever touched the soil. Not after. And that's what makes this so frustrating. Because at planting time, everything looks fine. The leaves are green. The stem is firm. You water it in. You feel good about it. But something has already gone wrong beneath the surface. And by the time the damage shows up, stunted growth, weak stems, disappointing fruit, it's too late to undo it. I see this every single season. A gardener does everything right through the summer. Waters carefully, feeds on schedule, gives the plant full sun, and still ends up with a harvest that doesn't match the effort. Meanwhile, their neighbor pulls fat, heavy, glossy peppers off plants that seem to grow effortlessly. The difference isn't luck. It isn't the variety. It's what happened in the first 30 minutes after that transplant came out of the pot. Today, I'm going to walk you through a 4-step planting method that fixes the most common reasons bell peppers underperform. Each step builds on the one before it. The first one is what protects the plant from losing weeks of growth. But if you miss step 3, you'll still end up with small fruit. Before we go further, welcome to vintage gardening. If you want practical techniques that turn small harvests into full baskets, subscribe and stay with us. And tell me in the comments how your peppers did last season. Big harvest, small fruit, blossom drop. I read every comment, and it helps shape what we cover next. Now let's talk about what's really happening underground, because this is where most gardeners lose half their harvest without ever knowing it. When you buy a bell pepper transplant from a garden center, or when you've grown one from seed indoors, that plant has spent its entire life in a small pot with controlled conditions, consistent moisture, stable temperature, no wind, no surprises. Then, in one afternoon, you pull it out and drop it into garden soil. Soil that drains faster, holds moisture differently, and is often 10 degrees cooler than what those roots are used to. The roots don't just adjust, they shut down. This is transplant shock. And bell peppers handle it worse than almost any common garden vegetable. Here's why that matters. Tomatoes are aggressive rooters. You can rough them up, bury them deep, and they recover within days. Peppers are different. They're slower to establish, more cautious. When their roots stall, the entire plant stalls with them. Not for a day or two. Sometimes for weeks. And every single week that plant spends recovering is a week it isn't producing flowers, isn't setting fruit, and isn't building the root system it needs to carry a full harvest. By midsummer, you're already behind, and you can't make up that lost time. So what if you could prevent most of that shock before the plant ever goes into the ground? You can. And it takes less than 30 minutes. Before planting, take your bell pepper transplant, still in its pot, and submerge the entire root ball in a container of room temperature water. Let it sit for 20 to 30 minutes. That's it. Now let me explain why this works, because this isn't just about getting the roots wet. There's actual biology here that matters. Most transplants are grown in peat-based potting mix. Peat holds moisture well when it's wet. But once it dries out, even partially, it becomes hydrophobic. It repels water. So when you plant a dry or semi-dry root ball into garden soil and water it in, the water flows around the root ball instead of through it. The outside of the soil gets wet. The roots inside stay dry. And you have no idea it's happening. The plant wilts. You water more. The surrounding soil gets soggy. The root ball is still dry in the center. And now you've got two problems: dry roots and waterlogged soil around them. Soaking before planting breaks that cycle completely. It fully rehydrates the peat, restores its ability to absorb moisture, and ensures that every root, not just the outer ones, has access to water from the moment it makes contact with your garden soil. If you want to go one step further, add a half-strength dose of liquid seaweed extract to the soaking water. Seaweed contains natural plant hormones, cytokinins and auxins, that stimulate root cell division. It's not a fertilizer. Think of it as a biological head start, but it tells the roots to wake up and grow. One thing to avoid: don't soak longer than 30 minutes, and never leave the root ball sitting in water overnight. You're rehydrating, not drowning. Too long in standing water starves roots of oxygen and creates a different kind of stress entirely. Here's a practical tip. Set a kitchen timer when you start the soak. Use those 30 minutes to prepare your planting hole. By the time the hole is ready, the root ball is ready. Nothing wasted. Let 20 to 30 minutes. Room temperature water. Half-strength seaweed if you have it. Timer set. That single step puts your plant weeks ahead of one that went into the ground dry. If you're finding this useful, subscribe to the channel. Practical growing techniques like this. That's what we cover every week. Now, the soak gets the roots ready. But here's where most gardeners accidentally ruin an otherwise perfect transplant. And it comes down to something deceptively simple. Planting depth. With bell peppers, the margin between too deep and too shallow is narrower than you think. And getting it wrong creates problems you won't see for weeks. If you plant too deep, burying even a small portion of the stem below the soil line, you're setting up stem rot. Unlike tomatoes, bell peppers do not produce adventitious roots from buried stems. That tissue stays soft, stays vulnerable, and in consistently moist soil, fungal pathogens move in fast. The base of the stem turns brown. It softens. And once rot takes hold at the stem base, there is no saving that plant. It's done. If you plant too shallow, with the top of the root ball sitting above the soil surface, the upper roots dry out quickly. The plant can't anchor. Wind moves it. And that rocking motion tears the delicate feeder roots that are trying to establish in the new soil. The plant survives, but it never really thrives. So here's the target. You want the top of the root ball sitting exactly level with the surrounding soil. Not above it, not below it. Perfectly flush. Look at the base of the stem. You'll see a faint line where the color changes slightly. That's the original soil line from the nursery pot. Match that line to your garden soil, and you've nailed it. After a week, test it. Press the base of the stem gently. A properly planted pepper feels solid. No wobble, no give. If it rocks, it was too shallow. If you see dark discoloration creeping up the base, it was too deep. That's 2 steps locked in: soak and depth. But even if you do both of those perfectly, there's still one more quiet mistake that limits how many peppers your plant actually produces. Most people have no idea they're making it. It's about what goes into the planting hole. And here, gardeners tend to fall into one of 2 camps. Either they dump in everything they own: compost, fertilizer, amendments, whatever's in the shed, or they add nothing at all. Both approaches cost you fruit. You need 2 things, just 2. The first is bone meal. Bone meal is a slow-release source of phosphorus, and phosphorus is the nutrient that directly drives flower formation and fruit development. When there isn't enough phosphorus available at the root zone, the plant redirects its energy into vegetative growth. Big leaves, tall stems, lots of green, but very few flowers. And fewer flowers means fewer peppers. It's that direct. Take about a tablespoon of bone meal, drop it into the bottom of your planting hole, and work it into the surrounding soil before you set the transplant in. You want it near the roots, not sitting on top where rain washes it away. The second is worm castings. Worm castings aren't just fertilizer, they're a living soil amendment. They introduce beneficial bacteria and fungi into the root zone that help the plant absorb nutrients more efficiently. They also improve soil structure in a way that synthetic products simply cannot. Better drainage when the soil is wet. Better moisture retention when it's dry. That balance is exactly what bell peppers demand. A generous handful mixed into the planting hole is enough. Work it in with the existing soil and the bone meal. Set your transplant on top and backfill. Now here's something important. Notice what I didn't recommend. I didn't say to add a high nitrogen fertilizer. That's intentional. Not too much nitrogen at planting time pushes the plant to grow leaves at the expense of flowers. You get a big, lush, impressive-looking plant that produces almost nothing. The sequence you want is roots first, flowers second, fruit third. Bone meal and worm castings support exactly that progression without overwhelming the plant. I'd like to hear from you on this. Have you used bone meal or worm castings before? Or is this something you're planning to try this season? Tell me in the comments. I'm always curious what's working in your garden. Friends, before I give you the final piece of this system, let me say something I think matters. Bell peppers are one of the most rewarding crops you can grow, especially if you want a garden that gives back without demanding everything from you. The plants stay compact. No sprawling vines. No complicated trellising. The fruit grows at arm height, easy to spot and easy to pick. And they do beautifully in containers. A 5-gallon pot on a sunny patio is all you need. When you do it right, few things match the satisfaction of picking a pepper that's heavy in your hand and glossy in the light. That's not a big garden dream. That's a Tuesday morning with a good container and a little know-how, which brings us to the last step. And honestly, this one might be the easiest to fix, but it's also the one people resist the most. Spacing. So give each bell pepper plant at least 18 inches of space from the next one. If you're growing in containers, 1 plant per pot, minimum 5 gallons. No exceptions. When plants are crowded together, airflow drops. Humidity builds around the leaves. Fungal diseases find exactly the environment they need. And every plant competes with its neighbor for the same nutrients, the same water, the same light. The result is smaller fruit on every single plant. Not just some of them, all of them. Proper spacing is the final protective layer around everything else you've done. The soak, the depth, the amendments. They all work better when the plant has room to breathe. So here's your complete system. 4 steps. Soak the root ball. Plant level. Amend with bone meal and castings. Space properly. Do those 4 things this season, and you won't just see a difference. You'll see the kind of harvest where you're handing peppers to your neighbors because you've run out of room in the kitchen. Heavy fruit, thick walls, deep color. The kind of peppers that make you trust your own hands in the garden. That's not a guess. That's what happens when the roots are right from day one. If you want more practical techniques that turn small harvests into full baskets, subscribe and stay with us. We're building smarter gardens here. And before you go, tell me in the comments what's been holding your peppers back. I read everyone, and your questions often become the next video.